Today we'll be recapping the manhwa, Leave Me Alone, Duke. Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, as it really helps our channel. Thanks. Our story starts late at night in a carriage bound for the royal castle. In the carriage is a mother and son who soon arrive at the estate. The butler immediately recognizes her as Lady Mabel and invites them in at once. Mabel asks after her mother, who is currently on her deathbed. Literally, she is surrounded by relatives who are shocked to see Mabel back in the castle grounds. Her mother is delighted to see her, even though she half believes that this is all a dream. She also openly admits that she is on death's door, so before she passes on, Mabel beckons her son forward to meet his grandmother for the first time. Little Patrick seems to have no idea what's going on. Clearly, he just thinks this is a touching family reunion. His relatives apparently had no idea he even existed, including the aged mother who is fading before their eyes. After pinching her grandson's cheek and telling her daughter she loves her, the old lady finally passes away, leaving her distraught children to mourn her. It's all very sad. But now that the immediate drama has passed, there are a lot of questions that need answering. Her siblings had no idea Mabel was even alive, let alone a mother. But she doesn't have time to clear up the confusion. They're not even planning to stay for the funeral. Her brother begs her to at least stay the night, and Mabel agrees. But it turns out that was the wrong move. She should have trusted her gut and got back on the road, because the man who has been hunting her down for all these years has finally found her. He's finally found his fiancée? Oh my gosh, so much has happened and we're only on the first chapter. Duke Quintrell may be the father of Mabel's son, judging by those bright blue eyes, but he is not her fiancé, at least not according to the would-be bride. You see, Mabel is the second-born child and eldest daughter of the Marquise Lobby. 6 years ago, she landed an engagement with the heir to the oldest and most influential family in the land, Percy Quintrell. But 1 year later, she disappeared after a wagon accident. They never found her body, but when 3 years passed and nothing more was discovered, Mabel was declared legally deceased, and therefore the engagement was cut off. But now, the Duke is so relieved to find her alive and well that he doesn't care about all that. He doesn't even want to know the reason she ran away in the first place. He just wants her back. Aw, it would be kind of sweet, if it wasn't also a little creepy. She doesn't seem to want anything to do with him, but it's all over when he spots Patrick. His eyes are a dead giveaway. They're a trademark of the Quintrell family and only appear in heirs. Seeing his sister's distress, the lobby heir tries to send the Duke away, but he ends up staying the night under the guise of mourning for their mother. How sneaky is that? Before heading to his room, the Duke warns Mabel not to attempt another nighttime escape, or else he'll really lose it. After all, he's been searching for her for 5 years. That amount of time would drive anyone crazy. That night, Mabel can't sleep. After remembering the near-death experience that caused her to flee in the first place, she decides to leave. She grabs her son and jumps in the nearest carriage, hoping to cross the border before sunrise. But the Duke won't let her get away that easy. Little does she realize he's the one driving the carriage. And they're not headed for the border, they're headed for his mansion. This guy just cannot let her go. He stops the carriage to talk to her, asking why she doesn't love him anymore and why can't they just start over. Dude, she spent 5 years hiding from you. Maybe take the hint? To really drive her point home, Mabel tells him that she doesn't love him anymore. The Duke takes one look at her and says she's lying. Wow, the level of delusion here is just... He takes her shaking hand in his and says he loves her. Mabel thinks he's lying too, but right now she's more concerned about her own options. After a moment to think, she gives in and promises not to run away, only on the condition that he takes her back to the Lobby mansion to attend her mother's funeral. Her brother is surprised to see her return so quickly, but as usual, Miss Mysterious doesn't have time to explain. They head inside to find her some mourning clothes, but before she reaches the door, Mabel runs into the Duke, with her son in his arms. That can't be a welcome sight. Even though he was only helping Patrick out of the carriage, Mabel grabs her son back immediately. The Duke watches him walk away with a suspicious look in his eye, wondering when she'll make a break for it. Honestly, it's hard to believe these kids were ever in love. Neither of them seem to trust each other one bit. While the grown-up relatives attend the funeral out in the cemetery, Mabel and Patrick sit inside reading together. I wonder if that kid has any idea what's going on. To him, this is all just a big adventure. He even asks his mother if she wants to come and play outside with him. Read the room, buddy. As well as being a bit inappropriate, the other reason they can't play outside is because Patrick can't be seen by the public. Word would get around real fast if Mabel was suddenly seen alive and with a son out of wedlock. A knock on the door announces Mabel's brother, who is accompanied by his wife, Christine. Running in behind them is the youngest sister, Marie. Now that the family are assembled, they can finally talk in peace and maybe shed some light on what the heck Mabel has been up to the last 5 years. As a noble, the only skill she really has is sewing, so she made a living from the pennies that she received as a seamstress. She also admits that yes, Patrick is Percy's child, although I'm pretty sure everyone had guessed that by now. Despite his noble heritage, Mabel wants to continue raising Patrick alone, which makes her siblings uncomfortable. They don't want to just let her wander back into the wilderness after missing her for so long. A sudden call for the Marquise interrupts their conversation. Duke Quintrell has arrived, and he wants to speak with the heir to the Lobby family. They sit down for a very tense cup of tea, where the Duke immediately announces his intention to marry Mabel. Slightly awkward for the Marquise, since he's literally just heard his sister swear to never marry him. The poor guy is literally sweating, trying to find a way to be honest while not offending the Duke at the same time. In the end, he settles with politely telling him that a marriage with his sister is impossible. Even though he himself really wanted them to be together, he can't refuse his sister's wishes, and she has expressed clearly that she doesn't want the Duke to be in Patrick's life. But frankly, even he isn't totally sure why that is. He even asks the Duke himself if he has any idea why she rejected him. Obviously, he's also stumped, or if not, he's a very good actor. Now that his ego is a little bruised, the Duke takes his leave and runs into Mabel in the hallway. Because, of course he does. She thought he'd already left, apparently, but Percy takes it as a sign that they're destined since they keep running into each other. She tells him outright that she wants nothing to do with him, and when he asks why, she seems surprised that he doesn't already know. As usual, she refuses to explain herself and just turns around to leave without another word. Anyone else kind of getting frustrated with this girl? She refuses to tell anyone what happened. She's being so dramatic, and for what? At the most convenient moment possible, Patrick wanders down the stairs in his pajamas and starts talking to the Duke, who he calls Uncle. Mabel freaks out, her hands shaking as she leads her son away from Percy, who tells her he really likes the Duke. Uh-oh, this is a nightmare situation for Mabel. I can see the Duke finding a way to use this to his advantage in the future. While her son sleeps soundly beside her, Mabel can't help but wonder if the reason he took a liking to the Duke is because they're blood-related. Then finally, in a flashback, we get to see some of the eventful carriage trip that started all this drama 5 years back. She had just found out that she was pregnant with the Duke's child and wasn't sure how he'd react. She was on her way to see him when the carriage stopped abruptly. She opened the door and an arrow suddenly flew inside, narrowly missing her face. Shaking, she assumed they'd been attacked by burglars or bandits and had to listen to the horrible sounds of her carriage driver being slaughtered outside. His last words were telling her to run, but before she could open the door, the attacker came in and grabbed her, throwing her onto the ground outside. There were bodies everywhere, all slaughtered by that one man. She asked him what she did to deserve this, and the assassin responded that he was only doing what he'd been told. He raised his sword to kill her, and she screamed out, offering him double, even triple whatever he'd been paid. At this point, she was only trying to stay alive for her unborn baby and would do whatever it took to escape. The assassin, seeing her clutch at her stomach, told her one thing, that she should stop thinking about her fiancé. He knew she'd gone to visit a friend's house and suddenly turned home, something she only told her family and her fiancé. So if those were the only people who knew, then the culprit was among them. Mabel trusted her family, so the only person who could have ordered her assassination was the Duke. At least in her mind. He also said that if he saved her, he would have to go right back to her fiancé and be killed for failing his task. I don't think he could have spelled it out any clearer. The only reason he felt any sympathy for her was because she was pregnant, so he gave her a choice. A painless death under his sword, here and now, or go home and eventually die at the hands of her fiancé. Obviously, she didn't like either of those options, so instead, she ran. Does anyone else think it's kind of fishy, by the way? Like, why would an assassin leave his target alone and straight up tell her who hired him? I'm a little sus. Poor Mabel believed him completely, as you probably would if you'd just seen innocent people murdered and were all shaken up. She ran through the forest, wondering how things could have gone so wrong when they were so in love. She did have some doubts, but considering his position as heir to the most powerful family in the kingdom, maybe he really could just pick her up and throw her away like that. Mabel awakes from her nightmares of the past the next morning, relieved to find Patrick safe and sound beside her. She bumps into Christine in the hallway, who directs her to the library to see her brother. Just as she's turning to leave, Christine dares to suggest that she stay a little longer in the mansion. After all, she has a child. It must be difficult to raise him alone, especially without her family's power and wealth. Mabel appreciates her sister-in-law's concern, but doesn't make any promises. She finds her brother preparing for a political meeting. He still seems curious about her escape attempts and asks if Patrick is the problem. He kind of insinuates that she might have wanted to ditch the baby with her family and disappear, but Mabel sets him straight. Patrick is her one and only priority. She's not about to leave him alone. But she is thinking about staying in the lobby mansion, which her brother is delighted to hear. It seems she's decided that there's no point in running, at least not for the next few days. There's safety in numbers after all, and her family are respected enough that they can stand against the Duke's surprise visits. That doesn't mean they won't run into each other though. Even at the political meeting, her brother runs into Percy. They have yet another uncomfortable conversation about his son, but before it gets juicy, the Queen's arrival is announced. All the nobles stand to attention for Her Majesty, who is honestly giving a major slay. I mean, look at that fit! And the purple hair? Love it! The meeting commences, which gives the nobles an opportunity to talk about the Queen's upcoming birthday. It's the first one since her coronation, so it's kind of a big deal. And since she doesn't have a husband, she appoints Duke Quintrell to plan it for her. Ooh, does the Queen have her eye on Percy? As it turns out, yes, she does. Wilhelmine Freeman ascended the throne at only the age of 19. 4 years ago, she met the Duke at a party and fell in love instantly. She made her feelings known, and he ended up rejecting her. Yikes. But despite the humiliation and the news of Percy's engagement and the whole Mabel drama, her feelings have never wavered. From pretty much the moment Mabel's death was publicly announced, she has been openly flirting with Percy whenever possible. This girl really doesn't mess around. Good thing the Duke isn't afraid to shoot her down every time. Of course, on this occasion, there's not much he can do. Who could refuse a royal request? Although, he does try, and she kind of just shoves it down his throat until he accepts. It's extra uncomfortable because this is a task usually performed by the Queen's partner. I'm sure that's exactly why she chose him for it, and it doesn't help that the nobles are pressuring her to find a husband. As soon as the subject is brought up, she openly suggests Duke Quintrell, asking the others what they think of him, as if he's not literally sitting right there. Ugh, so awkward. He just about manages to sidestep the question, suggesting that the council put forward a selection of potential candidates from the best families in the kingdom. When they break for lunch, Percy gets summoned to the Queen's office for a private chat. This can't be a good sign. Once they're alone, she speaks more frankly. How many times will he continue to reject her? The Duke always says the same thing, that he loves his fiancée and can't forget her. This seems to drive Wilhelmine over the edge. She says she's waited long enough and asks him outright to marry her. Left with no other choice, Duke Quintrell admits the truth, the real reason he can't accept her proposal. Because Lady Mabel is still alive. Oh, you've done it now. That's supposed to be a secret. Seriously, this guy is either really thick or he really is out to get her. 2 years ago, when Mabel had been missing so long that she was registered deceased, Queen Wilhelmine was over the moon. Obviously, that's kind of suspicious, but she really just loves the Duke that much. She was hoping this would finally be a turning point and that her love would begin to forget his former fiancé. So 2 years later, when he hears that she's still alive, Her Majesty is shocked. She doesn't believe it at first, but when he explains the story of how he found her, it starts to sink in. After a moment to think, Wilhelmine says her feelings will remain the same. You gotta give the girl credit, she sure is determined. He tries to convince her that another man would be just as good, but the Queen will not be swayed. In fact, she kind of guilt trips him, saying that the only person she would ever marry is him. In that case, the royal line of succession is directly in his hands. If he doesn't agree, the kingdom might have a pretty big issue. It makes the Duke hella mad. He hides it well, and instead of getting angry, he admits there is another reason he can't marry her. He already has a kid. Boom! Surely that will do the trick. Marrying him would be a dishonor for a monarch. It's even against the royal laws, but Wilhelmine won't hear it. She doesn't care what she has to deal with so long as she gets him. Kind of sounds like a threat, and the Duke takes it as one. He warns her not to touch his family, or else his loyalty will truly be tested. The second she steps outside, the Queen demands that the Marquis' lobby come to meet her at once. Back at the lobby mansion, the youngest daughter Marie is playing with Patrick, introducing him to all sorts of toys to play with. Mabel thanks her, but she doesn't seem to mind. She's still pretty young herself, and besides, Patrick is just too cute. She also makes a comment about how much he looks like his dad, but Mabel kind of just ignores that one. Their peaceful playtime is soon interrupted by the king of uninvited intrusions, the Duke Quintrell himself. Except this time, he doesn't say a word. He just hugs her. He's so relieved that she hasn't left. I guess he just couldn't contain himself. And maybe he's a total psychopath, but he does seem genuinely relieved. I don't know, guys. I'm finding it real hard to peg the villain in this series. Apart from very dramatic entrances, the Duke also came to see the Marquis. Christine announces that he was called back to the royal palace on Her Majesty's request. And speaking of Her Majesty, Percy comes clean about admitting the truth to Wilhelmine, and immediately Mabel is furious. Understandably. He explains the whole situation with the Queen and how she's been trying to propose to him for literally 4 years now. Mabel is pretty shocked that he refused her. I mean, their marriage would make him a king. And she still doesn't believe that the Duke is truly in love with her, so there would be no reason to refuse. Mabel accidentally admits that she was still planning to run away in future, and Percy asks if she really wants to spend her life like that, if she wants Patrick to grow up without a father. Once again, her walls come up, and she tells him not to worry about her son. Emphasis on her. Frustrated, she turns away from him. She's only halfway across the room before the Drama King has grabbed her from behind, wrapping his arms around his fiancée. Just as extra as the Queen, he asks her again to marry him. God, what is with these people? So much drama. I'm not sure if it's fear or romance, but Mabel's heart is beating like crazy right now. He's holding her tight, like really tight, as if he thinks at any moment she might break free. It's really hard to even think when he's like this, but Mabel reminds herself that all of this is fake. She still believes the Duke is hiding his true intentions, waiting for the perfect time to strike. So she breaks free, telling him to take the opportunity that Queen Wilhelmine is offering him. The Duke is shocked to hear her speaking so comfortably about a woman that wants him. Before now, he really thought she was lying when she said she didn't love him, but this makes him second guess. When he asks her straight up, Mabel confirms his fears. She even goes so far as to say she never loved him. Ouch! That one's gotta hurt. But just like Her Majesty, Percy is persistent. Before he leaves, he tells her that he never will stop loving her, no matter how she feels. Kind of inconsiderate, don't you think? Once the Marquis has returned from his chat with the Queen, he sits down with the Duke. She told him to cut off the engagement between his sister and the Duke. She even offered him a royal reward for cooperating. And since there's a kid in the mix, she offered to adopt it herself. Damn, that's messed up! The Duke tells him not to worry. No matter what happens, he will protect Mabel. He also says that if she continues to refuse him, he'll just be single until he dies, which is emo as heck. But before he leaves, he asks the Marquis one favor, to help convince his sister. This puts Mabel in a tough spot. She won't change her mind about the Duke, but she also doesn't want to bring down the wrath of the Queen on both their families. That gives her brother a small spark of hope. If she's worried about the Quintrell family, maybe she does still care for him after all. For once, Mabel doesn't outright deny his claims. He is the father of her child. Of course, she doesn't want him hurt, but she can't tell if she hates him or loves him, especially when her brother tells her that the Duke swore to protect her against the Queen. As usual, the poor Marquis is unable to sway his sister, and to be honest, he doesn't want to. He just wants her to be happy for once. So they agree to let her live a quiet life in the lobby mansion for a little while, hoping that the Duke will eventually give up. Right. I think we all know that's not gonna happen. Before long, a month has passed and the Queen's birthday comes around. The capital city of Cablin overflows with cheerful people, singing and dancing for their Majesty. Despite his frustrations, the Duke does his duty and plans a wonderful party, sparing no expense. He's got plenty of admirers among the guests too, but no one will approach him for fear of upsetting the Queen. She arrives in full royal splendor and immediately demands that Percy stay beside her the whole night. Talk about clingy. She asks him for a dance, but the Duke says he's not feeling well, so then she just walks away? This girl couldn't be more sus if she tried. She walks up to the top of the staircase, grabbing everybody's attention. Her speech starts with the usual, thanking her guests, a toast to her birthday, but then she announces her one special wish for the day and calls Duke Quintrell to come up and join her. Uh-oh, I have a bad feeling about this. She gets him into position and declares that by royal order, Percy Quintrell become the prince consort of the Freeman Kingdom. Well, there it is, folks. She's officially done it. It's not so much a proposal as an order given on the Queen's birthday, no less. I'm not sure if he can wriggle his way out of this one. Despite the crowds watching their every move, despite how clearly she made this a command, the Duke somehow finds the nerve to refuse her yet again. In front of everyone, he declares that he already has a child and would therefore not be fit to be the prince consort. Oh, great! So to save his own hide, he's thrown his fiancée and son under the bus? Way to go, Duke! He formally apologizes for deceiving the royal family. He bows once and then walks away, leaving her standing there in front of all her guests. Anyone else feel like he's not going to get away with this? Humiliating the Queen in front of all her subjects? Someone's gonna pay for that. The Marquis' lobby catches the Duke outside, furious that he just exposed his sister like that. Patrick will now be the subject of all the noble gossip for weeks, if not months, and they won't rest until they find the mother, too. As usual, the Duke assures him it will all be fine. He has some kind of plan, but just like his fiancée, he prefers to be mysterious and secretive until it's done. Irritating as ever, Percy. Thank you. He leaves for some kind of business trip, while the poor Marquis is left worrying about his sister and his nephew's safety. Meanwhile, the lady herself is sitting at home doing a bit of embroidery. She has no idea what's just happened at the party. Right now, she's focused on getting her son ready for bed. He asks about the party and how come they couldn't go. It's fun playing with his mother and aunt, but he wants friends his own age to hang out with. So Mabel promises to take him to a party someday, when he's a little older. That's obviously a lie, but it is true that she can't keep him cooped up in the mansion much longer. She's already planning their next escape, but in the meantime, she changes the subject to tell him how handsome he looks. Patrick sees an opportunity and takes it, asking if he's as handsome as his father. He's never asked about his dad before, so Mabel is shocked. It's just like the Duke said to her. He's been pretending not to know, but that doesn't mean he's not curious. Has he figured out the truth already? Before she can fumble her way through some excuse, a maid announces that the others are back from the party. It's still early, so immediately she knows something is up. Marie tells her everything, from the proposal to the public humiliation of the Queen. Mabel is instantly furious, but so is another character who we haven't had a chance to meet yet. This is Marguerite, or Meg, the Duke's younger sister, who is literally a copy and paste version of him. The rumors have already spiraled out of control. People are saying that he has 10 illegitimate children and a peasant wife. The Duke may not care what people are saying behind his back, but Meg certainly does. She tries to talk some sense into him, asking why he's still pursuing a woman who clearly doesn't want him. Finally, someone talking sense in this manhwa. The Duke doesn't take kindly to her advice and immediately turns around, headed for the lobby mansion, off to cause another scene again. He arrives at the lobby estate and immediately sets himself up with some tea on the balcony, because at this point, it's practically his home as well. Mabel reluctantly joins him, nervous since this is the first time they've seen each other in a month. She asks why he refused the Queen, even though I'm pretty sure by now everyone and their mothers know why. She seems worried that he feels a responsibility to Patrick, but the Duke sets her straight, admitting that Mabel will always be more precious to him than their son. He also admits that if two parents aren't married, the laws of Freeman says that the custody of a child can be claimed by the parent of higher status. So technically, he could take Patrick from her anytime he wants. What the heck is this guy's tactic? I thought he wants her to fall in love with him, so why is he threatening her? When she asks if that's his plan, the Duke says he doesn't want to separate them, so she might as well make things easier and come along too. He accepts that he must have done something wrong to make her so upset with him, but he has no idea what it is. At least, that's what he says anyway. He gets down on one knee and asks for a chance to make up for his mistake. Just 1 year. If she is willing to give 1 year of her life to him and at the end of it she still hates him, then he will let them both go. But she has to do the whole 9 yards and become Duchess of Quintrell and everything. To earn her trust, he's even willing to change his will so that all the Quintrell estates will be inherited by Patrick when he dies. And he offers to transfer sole custody to Mabel. It's a tempting deal, but she still believes that he was the one who tried to kill her. What if this is all some dramatic ploy to finish her off and stage it as an accident? Mabel agrees to think about his offer and promises to give her answer by next week. She's still thinking about the offer by the time she arrives at the royal palace. It was bound to happen at some point, but finally, the Queen has summoned Mabel for a private audience. They've never actually met before, so she introduces herself and the two women take a seat. You could cut the tension with a knife. Poor Mabel is freaking out, while the queen is clearly just toying with her. She congratulates Lady Lobby on her safe return, and also on the health of her child. As if she doesn't know already, she asks Mabel who the father is, forcing her to confirm that it is indeed Duke Quintrell. She also asks if she intends to marry the Duke, which Mabel quickly denies. But she admits that it's not quite that simple. If she refuses the Duke completely, she risks losing custody of her child, which the Queen is shocked to hear. Obviously, the Queen's #1 motive is still marrying Percy, which means getting Mabel out of the picture. So she offers to make an exception to the laws, asking if she would still want nothing to do with the Duke if she had 100% of custody. Mabel says yes, so the Queen immediately declares to protect her right over Patrick, even if the nobles oppose it. In return, she wants Mabel to promise that she will never marry the Duke. It feels dangerous to make a deal with Wilhelmina of all people, but what choice does she have? She just offered her everything she's ever wanted on a silver platter. So of course, Mabel accepts, promising to keep their conversation a secret from the Duke. Just as she's leaving, Her Majesty asks one last question. She's curious after all this time why Mabel still refuses Percy, even after she originally loved him and they shared a child together. As always, Miss Mysterious refuses to answer, so the Queen drops it. Everything seems to be finally going Mabel's way for once. That is, until she runs into the Duke outside the palace. Oops, so much for keeping their meeting a secret. So she tries to make the excuse that she came to see her brother, but the Duke points out that there is no council meeting today. He asks if she came to meet the Queen, which, they're both in the royal palace, what else could she possibly be doing? As usual, Mabel is a terrible liar. Her trembling hands always give her away and give the Duke another opportunity to act dashing and chivalrous. Mabel snatches back her hand and says it's a secret. But that just makes the Duke more curious, and he knows Wilhelmina well enough to know that she probably threatened to keep her silent. Mabel just brushes him off, saying he's worrying over nothing. So then he suddenly turns around and says he'll just ask the Queen himself. She grabs him and asks him not to, still trying desperately to convince him that it's not a big deal. Someone get this girl some acting classes, stat! He can tell she's uncomfortable, so in the end, Percy drops it and lets her walk away. When Mabel arrives home, Christine is there at once to check that she's okay. She confides in her stepsister about all the offers being floated her way. It's a difficult position to choose between the Duke and the Queen, but either way, she gets to raise Patrick herself, so I guess both are kind of a win. Speaking of the kid, Patrick comes running up to his mother as soon as he spots her, asking where she's been and who she was meeting up with. As usual, his first guess is the Duke. Apparently, he's just obsessed with that guy. Mabel quickly changes the subject and suggests they have dinner together instead. At the next council meeting, the Queen is told that the king of a neighboring nation known as Tesla is interested in negotiating a marriage with Wilhelmina. He has a good reputation. He's ambitious and generous, and he's supposedly quite handsome. Plus, his country is very promising and would make a great alliance if she agreed to the match. But shockingly, she doesn't. She thinks it would be difficult to keep the peace between two ruling families, especially once kids and succession got involved. I'm sure that's true, but let's be honest. We all know the real reason is still the Duke. They settle the matter by agreeing that she will end up marrying a freeman noble. Then, without warning, the Queen suddenly brings up the custody of Percy's child and says she strongly believes it should be handed to the mother. Well, that was subtle. The Duke opposes it immediately, declaring that a law written by their ancestors shouldn't be messed with. The Queen says she doesn't intend to break the law, but she's the monarch after all. Who else could have the power to bend the rules? Luckily, the Duke is also backed up by other council members who think his illegitimate child makes him an inappropriate match for the prince consort, regardless of who the child belongs to. They suddenly start suggesting their sons or other good freeman nobles. But the Queen really won't let it go. She still wants to give total custody of Patrick to Mabel, claiming that it would solve any issues in his reputation and allow them to get married. But if there's one person more stubborn than the Queen, it's Percy. He outright declares his intention to marry the mother of his child and basically tells her to stop interfering. The nobles do their best to change the subject, but by then, Wilhelmina is having something of a psychotic break. She starts laughing like a maniac and orders the Duke to bring the child to the palace so that she can see him in person. She wants to know for certain if he's the Duke's son and says that if he refuses, she will punish him for lying. When Mabel hears the news, she's mad. Not just because now her son is being thrown into the middle of the mess, but because the Queen basically backstabbed her. She promised to protect her son, and now she's demanding he make an appearance? This is not gonna fly well with Mama Mabel. When the Duke gets home from the council meeting, there's a letter waiting for him. He barely reads it and immediately tells his sister to prepare for guests and bring out the best tea. Lady Mabel has finally made a visit to the Quintrell mansion. It's been a long time since she last stepped foot in this home. You'd think she might be triggered, but Mabel has fond memories of this place. The house looks exactly the same as she left it. The only things that have changed are her and the Duke. He, of course, is delighted to see her. Maybe he thinks she's come to accept his proposal, but if he had any hopes for this meeting, Mabel shuts them down immediately. She tells him straight away that she heard about what happened at the council, and the Duke starts to sweat. He tries to make excuses, but she's not interested. She comes clean about the deal between her and the Queen, but admits that after today, she can't keep her promise. So instead, she agrees to his offer to live as his wife for 1 year. Whoa! I was not expecting that! I thought she came to tell him off, not to marry him. The Duke should be jumping for joy, but actually, he's upset. He knows she's doing this because she thinks Patrick is causing trouble for Percy in front of the nobility. He tells her not to care about rumors and what other people think of him, but Mabel says that's ridiculous. How could she not care? That makes him feel a little better, seeing that she cares about his reputation. So he draws up their contract with a smile, even recognizing Patrick as his legal heir. They both sign, and then the deed is done. He sends it to the family attorney so that it will be all formally legalized. Mabel returns home to break the news to her family, but it seems like they're kind of relieved. The only thing now is to tell Patrick. It's hard enough that he's so fond of the Duke, and she still doesn't want to tell him that he's his father. But even a 4-year-old is going to have some suspicions if they suddenly move in and get married. Her family encourage her to tell Patrick the truth as soon as possible to avoid any damage. That night, while they're lying in bed, she suddenly brings up the Duke. Straight away, Patrick asks when he can next see him, since the Duke hasn't come to visit in a while. She mentions the idea of them living together, and he immediately gets excited. It's quite a surprise to his mother, since he's only met the Duke a handful of times and has never been to his house. But Patrick doesn't mind. He's also a lot sharper than his mother realizes. As soon as she mentions moving in, he asks if they're getting married. You can't get anything past this kid. He even asks if she loves him. Mabel sidesteps the question and says she loves Patrick the most. She tries to tell him the truth about his father, but the words just won't come out. Luckily, Patrick does the work for her, asking if the Duke is his real father. He's such a sweet kid. Mabel is expecting all kinds of questions about why they didn't live together from the start or why she kept the secret from him. But Patrick doesn't care about any of that. He's just happy they're all going to be together, and whatever is in the past can stay there. Seriously, what a mature 4-year-old! Mabel is so delighted that she tucks him back into bed, singing him lullabies until he falls asleep. Aww. Soon, the Duke's birthday rolls around, which makes for a busy day at the Quintrell household. And there will be guests galore. The preparations have all been made. The only thing missing is the Duke himself. Lawrence the butler reassures her that he will be on time. He's probably busy being excited that his fiancée has finally decided to move in. One person who won't be very happy to hear the news, of course, is the Queen. She's gone to extra effort to make herself look as radiant as possible. She even brought a gift. The other guests immediately start kissing the Queen's butt as soon as she enters, telling her how beautiful she looks. The Duke is the only one not paying attention to her, as he's already surrounded by a crowd of his own admirers. And damn does he look fine! Seriously, Mabel could do a lot worse. The Queen makes her way over to Percy, who is just as cold as usual despite her many attempts to flirt with him. She encourages him to take a few days off after all his hard work, which he does actually consider. She mentions her special gift, which she wants the two of them to open in private. Sensing a trick, the Duke loudly claims that he wants everyone here to see it, so that everyone knows how kind the Queen is. She brings the gift out, and Percy starts to unwrap it. He pauses halfway, shocked when he realizes what it is. Wilhelmine has gifted him the clothes worn by her great-grandfather, the first king of Freeman. She's basically saying she wants him to be head of state beside her. The Duke begrudgingly accepts, and then Wilhelmine asks him for a dance. He perks up a bit after that, because it gives him an excuse to introduce his only dance partner for the evening, his fiancée, Mabel. She's even dressed in matching clothing too, which is really cute. Patrick looks like a mini Percy in his outfit. The Duke introduces him to the rest of the guests as his fiancé and son. The Queen storms out at once, making Mabel worried. But she really wasn't getting the hint. I guess this was bound to happen at some point. All eyes are on them now, and although Patrick desperately wants to join the party, his parents decide it's best for him to be tucked up in bed. I keep forgetting that he's literally 4. It's already way past his bedtime. Literally, the second Patrick has left, the Duke starts getting real touchy-feely with his fiancée. He's so excited to finally show her off in public. And now that the queen is gone, everyone is allowed to be excited about Lady Mabel's return. But after thousands of questions about her disappearance and her mystery child, Mabel is exhausted by the end of the evening. While taking a quiet break on the balcony, she is approached by Meg, who welcomes her back with a warm smile. She can tell that Mabel is a bit uneasy about how everything went down today. But since she went ahead with it anyway, even though it was the Duke's plan, Meg thinks she must really be in love. Oh my God, give this poor woman a break already! Why is everyone so interested in whether she's in love or not? Mabel assures her future sister-in-law that this is all to secure Patrick's custody. But even if that is the case, Meg is just happy that they'll be living together soon. As always, Mr. Interruption arrives, so Meg wanders off to give the couple some alone time. He seems worried about how Mabel handled all the social interaction, but she assures him that she had a good time despite all the rumors and questions. Then everything gets a little quiet. The Duke seems to think that's the perfect time to reach over and pull some grass from her hair, but it only makes things more awkward. Uncomfortable, Mabel wishes him a happy birthday and then heads indoors. Jeez, I wonder what their chemistry was like before if this is how they ended up. 3 days later, Mabel and Patrick are due to officially move into the Quintrell estate. The Duke is so excited that he keeps mumbling out loud to himself, irritating his poor sister who's trying to read. Like the rest of us, Meg is surprised that the Duke has clung onto her for so many years, despite constant rejections and disappearances. But the Duke doesn't seem to mind. It's all coming together at last, and he truly believes that he may make Mabel fall in love with him. Cocky much? Percy turns the conversation on his sister, asking if there's anyone who's caught her eye. Although she's of an age to be married, Meg has plenty of time and doesn't fancy anyone at the moment. Just as her brother is starting to get pushy, a steward announces that a carriage full of luggage has arrived at the front door. He practically leaps out of his seat and runs straight outside to greet his fiancée. She's still formal with him, despite the fact that they're contractually married as of today. Little Patrick isn't quite as excited to see the Duke for once. Maybe since he knows that he's his father, it's a bit awkward? He even calls him uncle rather than dad. Percy can tell that the kid is scared, so he gets down and tells him to call him whatever he likes, so long as he's comfortable. That's all that matters. He invites them both inside for some food and leads Patrick hand in hand to the door like a real father. This must be so weird for Mabel. Meg takes her to her new room, which has been decorated with every imaginable luxury. Mabel is very grateful, but she's already a bit overwhelmed by the glitz and glamour. Their lunch was extravagant, and the place is like a maze. She sent Patrick and Percy off on a tour of the house to give them some time to get to know each other. Patrick's eyes are even wider than usual, if that's possible. They visit the reading room, where he asks if the Duke has any comics. Look around, buddy. I don't think this is that kind of place. But the Duke will do just about anything for his son, so he offers to buy some. The reading room also doubles as an office, so if Patrick ever needs his father, he tells him to come here. Then, without any warning, the Duke suddenly asks him if he hates him. Oh my God, this guy is such a drama queen. But he knows that Patrick will tell the truth, so I guess it's only natural for him to be curious. Like all kids, Patrick is brutally honest and admits that he's not so happy with the new arrangement. But not because he hates the Duke. It seems more like he's scared that he'll suddenly disappear. He sticks out his pinky and asks him to promise. If the Duke will stay by his side, then he will call him dad. If not, he doesn't want him. But the Duke takes him very seriously and makes the pinky promise. From then on, Patrick is all smiley and calls him dad straight away. Aw, this kid is so innocent. Meanwhile, Mabel is summoned to greet the Quintrell staff. She seems to be looking for someone in particular. Some maid she remembers from before her accident who is no longer here. The butler tells her that the maids come and go pretty regularly, so the person she's after probably doesn't work here anymore. She formally introduces herself, so the head staff members do the same. The butler's name is Lawrence, and the head maid is Michelle. They're already treating her like the mistress of the house, which makes the Duke very happy when he turns up. He calls over a maid named Janet, who was Meg's nursemaid a long time ago. The Duke wants Janet to help look after Patrick too. But up until now, Mabel has been totally responsible for her son, so she isn't totally comfortable with the idea. She's also worried about Patrick sleeping alone for the first time. But between the Duke's encouragement and Mabel's assurance, the kid agrees to start doing things for himself and with a nursemaid. After that's sorted, they gather in the dining room for another insanely extra dinner. Although, I don't know why Mabel is complaining. I would want to eat like this every day. Patrick struggles a bit with his steak, so the Duke cuts it up for him. Mabel is surprised but relieved to see the two of them getting along more comfortably after their tour around the mansion. It looks like they're starting to become a real family. That evening, Mabel has the luxury of a whole team of maids to bathe and dress her, which is probably the first time in years. Once they've got her all ready for bed, they bid her goodnight, leaving her alone in this big, gorgeous room. No matter how pretty it is to look at, Mabel feels so uncomfortable around this house, especially with how hard the servants are working. She's already wondering how Patrick is doing on his own, so when she hears footsteps outside, she jumps out of bed. But surprise, surprise, it's the Duke instead, and he is dressed, or should I say undressed, for bed. Mabel is flustered, as all of us probably would be, but unlike the rest of us, she refuses him, telling him they're not a normal couple, so they shouldn't act like one. The Duke is not having any of it and gently holds her face. Sure, they're not a normal couple, but does she want people to find out about the contract? It's meant to be a secret, so in his mind, they should act like newlyweds. And then he flips her on the bed. Okay, no one freak out. He may be crazy hot, but there's no way in hell Mabel is gonna go through with this. And just as you might have predicted, she gets really mad and shoves him off. He was hoping they would sleep together so that the maids would find them in the same bed in the morning and think all was well. But let's be honest, after 5 years, I think this dude is getting desperate. Since that excuse fails, he moves on to telling her he loves her over and over again. Okay, this is starting to get a little creepy now. The lady said no, Percy. He moves in for a kiss, and for once, Mabel doesn't move away. But just before their lips touch, they hear the sound of footsteps outside the door. Glad for the excuse to put some distance between them, Mabel rushes over to find Meg and Patrick beside her. They ran into each other in the corridors. Apparently, Patrick had been asking all over the mansion for his mommy. Poor little guy. Meg notices her brother sitting on the bed and asks Mabel if he was bothering her. I feel like she knows exactly what just happened, but the lady pretends it's all fine. She takes Patrick back to his bedroom to sing him a lullaby, leaving Meg to bid her brother a very awkward goodbye. Anyone else kind of glad he got caught? He was coming out real strong just then. I feel like he needs to be taken down a few pegs. The next morning, Mabel wakes after a fitful night of sleep, not used to her new bed. She turns over to find the Duke sitting right beside the bed, staring right at her. Seriously, man, tone it down a little. As anyone would be, Mabel is totally freaked out. Her scream is loud enough to bring maids rushing into the room, only to find the Duke on one knee, telling them to get out. Other than creepily watching her sleep, he also came to ask her to breakfast so they could eat together. Though I'm pretty sure he could have done that without giving her a mini panic attack. Mabel tries to draw a boundary, suggesting that they eat separately from now on. The Duke responds that it would be a nightmare for the staff, and once again uses the excuse that they have to convince people that they're falling in love. But then he lands the real kicker. He points out that Patrick thinks they're really husband and wife now. Wouldn't it be weird for him to see mom and dad not eating together? Ugh, I hate that he's right. Just to really seal the deal, he also tells her about his pinky promise with Patrick and how he swore not to leave them alone again. After that, Mabel really has no choice. She agrees to act like a happy wife and then kicks him out so she can get changed. Patrick and Meg are waiting right outside the door, so he grabs his son and takes him to the dining room. Soon, the whole family are assembled in front of another fancy meal. Although, is anyone else wondering why they have steak for every meal? Like, for breakfast too? Really? They all ask about how Patrick slept. Seems like everyone has worried, but in the end, he was fine. Then in return, he asks how mom and dad slept because he thought they stayed together. After Mabel splutters out half her breakfast, the Duke reassures her that it's normal for husband and wife and doesn't deny his assumption. All of these little lies are building up to form the picture of a perfect couple, just the way the Duke wants it. And the reason he wants it that way is so that word gets back to the Queen about their marital bliss. But she's not going to sit still and let them fawn over each other. She orders her butler to visit the Quintrell mansion to deliver an invitation for a tea party. After all, there's a new duchess in town. It isn't long before the invite falls into Mabel's hands. When she finds out it came from the royal palace, she starts to sweat. But the letter itself is perfectly polite, inviting her to a party for all the noble ladies in 6 days' time. So at least she won't be alone in front of the Queen. She's about to send off her reply when suddenly the maid announces a visitor. A woman named Bonnie Mercy has arrived as Patrick's new tutor. Once again, it seems like the Duke made a decision about Patrick without consulting his mother. I don't know about you guys, but he's really starting to get on my nerves. The Duke insists that since Patrick is his heir, he needs to learn the basics of noble etiquette as soon as possible. Lessons will begin tomorrow, and for today, Bonnie is just going to introduce herself to the young master. The moment she leaves the room, Mabel flies off the handle. She doesn't disagree with the decision, but she at least should have been informed. The Duke apologizes and tries to claim it was all late notice, but Mabel doesn't believe a word of it. She's worried that Patrick is still too young. Besides that, he's still adjusting to a new home. Isn't it a little early? The Duke assures her he's only trying to do the best for his son, and eventually his wife softens. But in future, he is told firmly to inform her about all decisions in advance. She tries to leave, but the Duke takes her hand and suddenly gives her a little kiss on the forehead. Such a classic boyfriend move. They make you mad and then act all cute to get forgiveness. A few days later, Patrick is acting all moody at the dinner table, so Percy asks what's wrong. He seems to be having some trouble adapting to his new lifestyle of academia. I guess it's a pretty big swing from just playing games all day. The Duke has heard that so far, he's been learning pretty fast, but he offers to slow down the pace of the classes if it's too much for the kid. Suddenly, he changes his mind, claiming that he wants to work as hard as possible to make his parents proud. I'm not gonna lie, if I was Patrick, I would absolutely have taken him up on that. But he does ask for one small favor. He wants one day to play with his mother all day with no classes. He's quite dedicated to his studies, so it takes a while for him to figure out a day in his busy schedule that he could afford to take off. He asks for one in 6 days' time, but that's when the Queen's tea party is. As soon as she admits that she's going to the palace, the Duke seems concerned. As he probably should be. It wouldn't be Wilhelmina if she didn't have something up her sleeve. Later in the day, he seeks Mabel out to ask her about the tea party. Because of course he does. He tries to convince her not to go, because he says he has a bad feeling, which duh. But she can't decline an invitation from the literal queen. That would be the quickest way to get on her bad side, which they really don't want to do. She also worried about the reputation of both their houses, which immediately cheers up the Duke. After all, she's not the type to worry for people she doesn't care about. In the end, the Duke lets her do what she wants, only asking that she be careful. The long-awaited tea party finally rolls around. The other noble ladies are actually really sweet, asking all these questions about the secret wedding and how pretty she looks. When the Queen arrives, they all stand to greet her and go into subservient mode. Wilhelmina is on her best behavior and makes a big deal about welcoming Mabel into the fold. She does make a point about the invitation and says she didn't expect Mabel to show, which just means the poor girl has to reassure her yet again that she's honored to be invited. Does she want her to get on her hands and knees? The conversation soon turns into the position of royal maid, a prestigious role as the Queen's closest confidant. The previous maid has fallen ill, so a new spot has opened up, and it looks like all the noble ladies want it. All except Mabel, of course, which is a dead giveaway. Even though she's sitting quietly drinking her tea, the Queen picks on her to be her new maidservant. Mabel does her best to politely suggest that the other ladies might be better suited to the task, but that's when the Queen really becomes cold. She asks if Lady Quintrell doesn't appreciate the honor, and even asks if it's because they went after the same man. Yikes! After all that, Mabel has no choice. She gets up and curtsies, accepting the position with grace. Oh no, this is a total nightmare. Not only is she being taken away from her son, but now she has to serve the one woman in the world who hates her guts? Only the Queen could have thought of something like this. We'll stop here for today, guys. Yes, I know you want more. Don't forget to ask for the next part in the comment section. Thank you guys for watching and for your support. Please subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot. Till the next one.